Starting with Hikaru versus Prax games, both the players played very solidly, and you will be shocked to know that it's still the middle part of the game, but both the players ended up repeating moves, ultimately leading to a 3-fold repetition draw. Looks like that because each of these players have suffered a bad loss in their early rounds, they do not want to take any chances and want to play absolutely safe. Well, that makes sense. Now let's jump on to Ian versus Vidit's game. So Ian has a strong passed pawn in the center of the board, and he does a few exchanges to create another passed pawn on the h file. Starting with knight takes bishop, knight takes knight, and now knight takes pawn, and we have another passed pawn. So Ian has two passed pawns, one in the center of the board and one in the king side of the board. He already has some advantage in the game, but Vidit immediately attacks the newly created passed pawn with the move rook to d3 check. It's a skewer attack, and now two of the pieces are attacking this passed pawn. Ian blocks the check with rook to f3, and now the rooks come off the board, and now the pawn falls. And now Ian is left with one passed pawn, but he still has a lot of advantage in the game. He's just 3 steps away from queening. So he immediately pushes the pawn because it's currently protected by this rook. b5 by Vidit. Since Vidit has a pawn majority on the queen side of the board, he tries to create his own passed pawn on the queen side of the board. Bishop to g5. Since the knight is blocking the path of the passed pawn, it totally makes sense to attack this knight. The knight moves. And now e7. The pawn is just 1 square away from queening. So bishop to d7 is forced and totally makes sense. He cannot allow the pawn to promote. And now before queening and exchanging this bishop for this strong passed pawn, Ian plays rook to d1, attacks the knight. King comes in the defense of the knight, and now king to e4. There is a double attack on this knight. Now Vidit is in a very bad position because if he tries to save the knight and moves it somewhere else, then Ian can sacrifice his rook and get rid of this strong bishop over here. If you capture back with the knight, then the queen is coming and your knight is already pinned. And if you capture this rook back with your king, then Ian can now play knight to g7, protecting the queening square, and now there is no way you can stop this passed pawn from queening on the board. So let's go back. Therefore, king to e4 is such a great move because it's just making Vidit's position worse, and Vidit is also losing material. So since Vidit's knight cannot be saved, so he plays bishop to e8. He's like, fine, if you capture my knight, I'll capture your knight. But that move doesn't help either, because after rook captures knight, bishop captures knight. Again, Ian doesn't want to lose this pawn by playing rook over here and then promoting it and then ultimately getting captured. So what he plays is bishop to c1. He makes sure that the base of this pawn structure is protected and black is not able to get any of his own passed pawns. A very good proactive move by Ian. And now bishop to g6 check. King moves 1 step up the board, and now b4. Vidit is desperately trying to create his own passed pawn. But Ian doesn't pay any attention there. He plays king to f6, attacking the bishop. Bishop moves back to the queening square, and now rook to d8, the obvious move, attacking the bishop. And here, instead of moving this bishop to some square and wasting time, Vidit here tries to go aggressive with pawn takes pawn, threatening to get his own queen on the board. But Ian immediately stops that idea by capturing that pawn. And now bishop moves to d7, and now king to f7. And there is now no way that black can stop the queening of this pawn. And when the pawn queens, black is going to lose material. White has a very strong winning advantage in the game. And that is why here at this point of time, Vidit Gujrathi resigned from the game. Moving on to the third game, which was played between Fabi versus Gukesh. Gukesh here moved his knight, and therefore Fabi got a free pawn over here. So he was a pawn up throughout the game, but after the few pieces came off the board, that extra pawn wasn't sufficient to convert it into a winning advantage. Why? Because Gukesh's defense was rock solid and he didn't allow Fabi's advantage to get converted into a victory. So after all the pieces come off the board, it entered into a queen's endgame and both the players ended up drawing the game. Moving on to the table of Nijat versus Alireza. Alireza played very good in this game. He executed 2 brilliant moves and he also got some winning advantage in the game, but he couldn't convert it because he made a mistake and then all the advantage was gone. Let's see what happened. So here white has just played knight to e4. There is a double attack on this bishop over here, And guess what Alireza played? Alireza played bishop to b7, allowing the sacrifice. Why? Because he did a very good level of calculation. Because after knight captures bishop, knight captures knight, now the queen cannot capture this knight, otherwise white is losing this strong bishop over here. So that is why bishop to b7 was such a great move. So in the game, Nijat captured the bishop anyway. So knight captures bishop, knight captures knight, and now instead of capturing this knight back and losing this bishop, Nijat thought, if I do this, anyway I'm losing my bishop, so let me play an in-between move. So he played bishop takes b5. Such a great move, just trying to grab another pawn before the bishop dies. And Alireza is also a very strong and smart player. He's like, okay, if you grab my extra pawn, I'm also going to do the same thing because my knight is dying anyway. So he also ends up playing knight takes pawn. Such a beautiful chess we are seeing over here. And now Nijat plays queen takes knight, pawn takes bishop, and the material is equal. Now Nijat activates a rook on the d file, attacking the queen. Queen moves, and now bishop to b2, activating the bishop on the strong diagonal. Queen to c5, centralizing the queen. Bishop takes knight. The idea is to blast open the g file so that Nijat can attack the king, and also messing up the pawn structure of black. So pawn takes bishop, and now rook a to c1, attacking the queen, activating the other rook. Queen moves to f5. Alireza knows that the pawn structure has been weakened. The rooks and the queen are actively looking forward to come on the king side of the board and start attacking the king. So he gets the queen to the king side of the board where it can actively help in defending the king. It's a very good move. Knight to d4, attacking the queen. Queen moves to g5. Totally makes sense. Alireza is saying, I'm not going to abandon my king over here. I'm going to take care of it. And also, if you see, there's a checkmate threat on this point. So Nijat blocks it with the move knight to c6, entering into black's territory as well as blocking this attack. And now rook to a6, attacking this knight. Very good move. And guess what Nijat plays over here? He cannot move the knight anywhere, otherwise he's getting made it. So to add another defense to this knight, he plays the move h4. Such a great move. On the surface, it looks like that he's weakening his king side, but actually it's not, because after queen takes pawn, the queen has left the 5th rank, which was earlier defending this pawn, and now Nijat can take this pawn, attack the bishop over here, as well as provide extra defense to this knight, and everything is well taken care of. Such a good move by Nijat. The bishop is under attack, but Alireza comes up with another brilliant move on the board with rook takes pawn. Alireza said, fine, if you want to take my bishop, take it, but now you can't stop the checkmate. After queen takes pawn check, king moves, and now it's a mate. So therefore, Nijat obviously didn't go after this bishop. He first stopped the checkmate with g3, but both the players ended up drawing the game after a few pieces came off the board, because they both had incredible precision in the endgame part. And after a few moves, the game ended in a draw. So let's quickly look at the scoreboard here. So after the end of 4 rounds, Ian Nepomniachtchi from FIDE is clearly leading the chart with 3 points. Fabi and Gukesh are at 2.5 points and tied for the 2nd place. Alright, let's move on to the women's section, starting with Aleksandra versus Vaishali. Both the players played very strongly here. They didn't make a single error in their game, and therefore they ended up drawing their game. Nothing interesting happened on the board. And now jumping onto the board of Kateryna and Tan Zhongyi. Tan Zhongyi is currently leading the women's chart. But in this game, Kateryna had a totally winning position because she had a very strong passed pawn on the d file. Plus this pawn was totally extra. So she was trying her best to convert this advantage into a win. So bishop to f4, queen a2, and we see that Kateryna is pushing the pawn forward slowly and steadily. Rook to a6, attacking the pawn. Queen comes over here, pawn takes pawn, and now she has 2 passed pawns. Tan started attacking on the king side of the board with g5, bishop moves, and now queen to f6, getting the queen to this side of the board to assist the other members of his army in order to stop this pawn. Queen to d5, adding one more defender, h5, queen f3, asking for a trade of queens. but Tan isn't interested in exchanging the queens because white has two passed pawns. They are very dangerous. So that's why the queen moved to g6, rook to a8. Since Tan refused to trade queens, now Kateryna is asking for a trade of rooks. So rook takes rook, queen takes rook, and we still have these two passed pawns. So h4, the idea is h6 attacking the bishop, which is currently protecting this passed pawn. And in order to protect the pawn, Kateryna played bishop to e5. But that's a blunder and all her advantage was gone. Why? Because bishop to e5 allows black to play queen to e6, attacking both of these pieces now. How are you going to defend it? If you play queen to e4, which was played in the game, then bishop takes d6, and now you cannot capture the bishop, the queen is hanging. So queen to a8 check first, king moves, and now the bishop, but in the process you have lost the passed pawn that you had. And now with this queen on the board, it's very easy to stop this pawn. It's not going to be easy process for Kateryna to promote this pawn. So let's go back a few moves. So therefore bishop to e5 is a total blunder. The winning move over here would have been bishop to f2, because this move allows white to get the bishop over here, assist this pawn, and probably assist this pawn as well in controlling the queening square if black doesn't capture this pawn in the next move. So this would have been a much better move. It would have maintained the Kateryna's advantage in the game, but as she was running low on time, she just had 4 minutes on the clock. She couldn't take the correct decision and she ended up making a blunder in the game, and thereby she lost all the winning advantage in the game, and the game ended up in a draw. And now Nurgyul versus Humpy. Nurgyul had a lot of positional advantage in the board because of the placement of her pieces. This bishop is very active, this bishop is very active, this rook is nicely placed on the open f file. This knight is ready to jump on the king side and start putting pressure on black's pieces. And if you look at black pieces, this rook is doing nothing over here, only this rook is active. This bishop is good, but this bishop is totally bad. This knight is totally bad, doing nothing over here. So because white pieces are better placed and are more active than black's pieces, and also white has a lot of space advantage in the game, white also has a very strong center control, all of these things are adding up to give a winning advantage to white's game. So Nurgyul is in a completely winning position over here. She has a lot of advantage in the game, and she just goes on converting this advantage into a win, starting with rooks takes pawn check, king moves, and now rook to g6. The rook has entered into black's territory, attacking the bishop. Bishop move back, bishop to f4. The other bishop gets activated, attacking the pawn over here. It's putting a lot of pressure here. Knight to c6. Humpy is trying to reposition this knight to a better place where it puts pressure on white's center. g4 by Nurgyul. Nurgyul has a passed pawn, so that must be pushed. She has already started to create a lot of pressure on black's king side. Rook to h3, rook to g5, and now rook to f8. Activating the rook on the open f file, but this pawn is falling now. Bishop to g2, attacking the rook first. Rook moves to h7, goes back in his own territory, and now bishop takes pawn. Nurgyul is up in material by 2 points over here with a strong passed pawn on the g file. This is a lot of advantage in the game. Bishop h6 attacking the rook. Rook moves, and now bishop to e8 attacking the rook one more time. Humpy is trying her best to fight back, but it's too late. Rook simply moves to h3, and now bishop g6 activating the bishop on an open diagonal, but it's not gonna help her. Bishop d6 by Nurgyul. Rook to d8 attacking the bishop. Bishop moves, asking for a trade of bishops. So bishop captures bishop, knight captures bishop, hitting this bishop, hitting this pawn over here. Rook captures rook, bishop captures rook. Few pieces have already come off the board, but it's not a good sign because Nurgyul is already up in material by 2 points. That's a lot of material to easily win this game. Bishop to c2, attacking, defending, and after a series of moves of these attacks and defense and checks, Nurgyul managed to improve her position more, converting it into a solid victory for white. And now moving on to the last game, Anna versus Tingjie. Anna had a completely winning position over here. All Anna needs to do is get the rook behind, get this king on this side of the board and then in front of these pawns, and with the coordination of both this rook and the king, white could have been able to easily stop these two connected strong pass pawns, and after the pawn falls one by one, she could have easily ended up winning the game. So the winning move in this situation was to play rook to g8, getting behind this pass pawn and then getting the king on this side of the board and ultimately in front of these pawns to stop all black's threatening activity. But instead of doing that, Anna, who was completely winning in this game, she made the mistake of playing rook to d5 check. It's a big mistake because by doing that, you're allowing the opponent king to move one step forward. And that's what Tingjie exactly did. She played king to f4. Though this pawn has fallen, but now g4. How are you going to stop this pawn? Your king is behind. Your king needs to be in front of the pawn to stop this from promoting. But look at the placement of your king. It's behind and now the rook will have to do the job alone to stop this pawn. And in that case, the rook will have to sacrifice itself for this pawn. And that will ultimately end up in a draw. So all her winning chances are gone just because Anna played one bad move. The game went on like this. Check, check, check. The pawn is pushing forward. And the pawn finally promotes but into a knight, because anyway if it promotes into queen, Anna can simply play rook to d1 and trade off the queen for the rook and the game would be a draw. And now let's look at the women's scoreboard. So Tan Zhongyi from China is still leading the tournament with 3 points, and at the second place we have Aleksandra Goryachkina, who is at 2.5 points. And now let's head on to the question of the day. Black is up in material by a whooping 8 points. But it is white's turn to play and it's a mate in 2. So, can you find the winning moves for white? Let me know your answers in the comments box and I'll see you in the next video.